I was small the winter the sun went down and did not come back, and I have kept a light burning every down since, and I will tell you why while I still have the voice for it. You have to understand the ground I come from before you can understand the man. Our world turns the way a heavy thing turns, slow, grudging, an old wheel with sand in the axle. Where I was born, on the high pan we called Downmark, the sun crossed the sky once and then it was gone, and it stayed gone the way a lamp stays out. Not for a night, not for a hand of nights, for months. The Ehil have a word for that season that does not translate cleanly into your speech. The nearest I can give you is the down, and even that is too small a word because the down is not simply darkness. It is a country you live inside. It has weather and hunger and a texture to it, and it has a thing that walks in it, and the walking thing is the whole reason there was ever a light on Downmark at all. My people were plateau folk, ashen-skinned, most of us, gray as a cold stove, with the silver crest that comes up along the scalp when we are young and lies flat and dull by the time we are old. Big eyes, you would call them too big, the eyes of a thing built to see in almost no light, because almost no light is what we were built for. We herded the shaggy pan beasts and we cut slow oil from the deep seams and we minded our young and we buried our old. And when the sun went down, we went aground the way our grandmothers had gone to ground, into the warm holes and the banked shelters, and we waited the down out. And when the sallow came, we gave it what it took, and we did not speak of it after. That is the part that is hardest to say to an off-worlder. You want me to tell you that we fought. We did not fight. There was nothing in our whole long memory that said the sallow could be fought, and a great deal that said it could not. It did not come like weather that you could shudder against. It did not come like a beast that you could spear. It came the way sleep comes to a tired child, quietly from no direction when your eyes had closed and the fire had burned low. And in the morning, if there was ever a morning, one of the small ones would not be in the shelter, and there would be no track, no blood, no torn cloth, nothing. Only the empty place where a child had been, still warm. We told ourselves it took only the sleeping. That much was true. We told ourselves it took only the young. That was true too, and it was the worst truth because our young could not help but sleep. In the deep of the down, an Ehil child falls into a torpor, a sleep so heavy it is nearly a death, breath slowed to almost nothing, the crest gone dark, the small body cold to the touch. It is how our young survive the cold. It is also, I understand now, exactly why the sallow could take them and no one wake. A child in the deep sleep cannot be roused. You can shout in her face and she does not stir. You can hold her and she does not know you are there. So we did not fight. We banked our fires and we crowded together and we put the smallest ones in the middle where the warmth was. And we hoped. And every down the sallow came into some shelter somewhere on the pan and took a child. And we called it the tithe. And we endured it. And we buried the memory of it the way you would bury an ember so it would not catch and burn the whole house down. I want you to hold that in your mind, a whole people, a good people, my people, who had simply decided over 10,000 years of dark, that the dark was owed something, and that the something was us. And then I want you to think about a man who had never heard of any of that, who came from a warm world with a fast sun, who took the one job on Downmark that no Ehil would take, and who, the first time it was explained to him, the first time some grave elder told him gently that the small ones were the dark's due and there was nothing to be done, looked at that elder as if the elder had grown a second head and said, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." His name was Elias Cade. He kept the lamp. The lamp was not ours. I should be honest about that. The great beacon on the north edge of the pan had been raised by the trading company that bought slow wool from us, and its purpose was commerce, not mercy. It burned so their haulers could find the field in the down and set down safe. It was a tower of black iron with a fire heart the size of a room, a lamp fed on our own oil, throwing a hard white light out over the pan for leagues. And because a fire that size will kill you if it is minded wrong, the company kept a keeper, and because no Ehil would sit alone by a burning light through the whole down, a burning light, Of all things, the very thing that the old story said drew the Sallow's attention. The keeper they hired was always an off-worlder. A hard, solitary sort of off-worlder. The kind who took a post at the edge of the world and did not ask why the last man left. Elias Cade was the fourth keeper in my lifetime, and he was not like the other three. The other three had kept the lamp and kept to themselves and gone home when their term was up, and we had thought nothing of them, the way you think nothing of a machine that does its work. Cade was a machine that looked back. I did not come to him gently. I want to be clear, because the soft way people tell these things is a lie, and he hated a lie. I came to him at the worst of it in the third month of that down, when the cold had turned from a hardship into a killing thing, and the slow oil in the deep shelters had run thin, and the band I belonged to, I had no mother by then, no father either, only a keeping woman named Oru who had taken me on when my own were gone, the way we take on the orphaned young. The band I belonged to had gone out onto the pan to reach a farther shelter that was said to still have fuel. And the pan had killed most of us on the way. I will not tell you that part slowly. Oru went down in the cold and did not get up, and I was very small, and I did the thing a small eagle does, which is turned toward the only light. On the whole black plateau from horizon to horizon, there was one light, and it was the beacon, and I walked toward it because there was nothing else in the world to walk toward, and I do not remember most of the walk, and I do not want to. I remember the door. It was iron and it was warm to the touch, warm in the down, an impossible thing, and I remember hitting it with the flat of my hand because I had no strength left to knock properly, and I remember it opening, and I remember the light and the heat pouring out over me like water, and I remember a big shape crouching down. Crouching down, that is the thing I want you to hear. He was a big man, Cade, tall even for an off-worlder, and the first thing he did, before he pulled me inside, before he did anything, was go down onto one knee so that his face was level with mine. I did not understand it then. I understand it now. He did it so that I would not have to look up at a giant in a doorway in the dark. He did it so the first thing I saw of him would be his eyes and not his size. Well, he said, he had a low voice roughened by the cold air he'd been breathing. There you are. As if he had been expecting me, as if I were late. He brought me in and he shut the dark out behind me, and that, though neither of us knew it, was the beginning of the whole thing. The beacon house was one great round room under the fire heart, and it was the warmest place I had ever been. I did not have words then for how warm. Cade had it rigged so the heat of the lamp bled down into the room through 100 iron pipes, and he had a low cot and a table and a store of company rations, and a wall of tools and gauges I could not read, and above all of it always was the deep steady roar of the fire, so constant that after a while you stopped hearing it and only felt it, a great heartbeat in the iron. He did not fuss over me. I have thought about that a great deal since. A softer man would have wept over the half-frozen child at his door, and I would have hated it, because I was a proud small thing, and I had just lost the whole world, and I did not want pity. I wanted to not be dead. Cade seemed to understand that without being told. He wrapped me in a heat blanket, and he set a cup of something warm and unfamiliar in my hands, and he sat down across from me, and he did not ask me a single question I could not bear to answer. He asked me my name. I told him. Esh. Esh, he said, trying it. All right, Esh, you're safe here. Do you understand me? I understood him. Our people's speech had been ground together for a generation by the trade. Every Ehel child learned enough of the off-worlder tongue to haggle, and every off-worlder who stayed learned enough of ours to be understood. I understood him, and I did not believe him. Because there was no such thing as safe in the down. Everyone knew that. Safe was a thing from before the sun went out. I must have said something like that. I was too tired to guard my mouth. I remember telling him, in the flat way a hopeless child says a terrible thing, that it did not matter that I was warm, because the Sallow would come and take me, because I was small and I would sleep, and it took the ones who slept. I remember the change in his face. He did not laugh at me, which would have been cruel, and he did not soothe me, which would have been useless. He went very still, and something behind his eyes went hard and level, and he said, "The what?" So I told him. Small and exhausted and certain, I told the offworlder about the thing that came in the dark for the sleeping young, the tithe, the empty warm places in the morning. I told it to him the way it had been told to me, as a fact of the world, as unarguable as the cold. He listened to all of it, and when I was done he was quiet for a moment, and then he said the thing I told you at the start. He said, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." And then, before I could be hurt by it, before I could think he was calling me a liar, he said, "Not that it isn't real. I believe you it's real. I mean the part where everybody just lets it. That's the stupid part." He leaned forward, forearms on his knees. "You're telling me a thing comes and takes your children, and nobody does anything." "There's nothing to do," I said. It was the oldest sentence I knew. "There's always something to do," he said. "You keep your eyes open and you keep a light on and you don't let it. That's something." I did not understand him. In the whole grammar of my people there was no sentence like that. You did not let the down have its due. The down was the down. He saw I did not understand, and he did a thing then that I have carried my entire life. He got up, and he went to the great fire heart at the center of the room, and he opened a small iron hatch in its base, and inside was a little steady blue flame, a pilot he called it, the small flame that never went out, the one that lit the great fire and would light it again if it ever failed. A little blue tongue of fire, no bigger than my hand, burning alone inside all that iron. "See that?" he said. "That never goes out. As long as that's lit, the big one can always come back. My whole job, the only job, is that little flame doesn't die." He looked at me. "You keep your eyes on the light, Esh. It comes for the ones nobody's watching. So somebody watches. That's the whole trick. That's all it is." Eyes on the light. He said it like it was nothing. He did not know he was saying the truest thing anyone had ever said to me. He did not know he was giving me the only weapon my people had never thought to pick up. That was the first night. There were a great many nights. He should have sent me to the shelter. I want to be fair to the size of what he did, and to do that you have to know that keeping me was against every reasonable thing. The company did not pay him to keep a child. The rations were counted for one. The Eagle shelter was 3 leagues south across the pan, dug deep and banked warm, and that was where an orphaned small one belonged, among her own kind, in the middle of the warmth where the tithe was at least shared out and not certain. By every law of sense, Cade should have bundled me up when the cold broke a little and carried me south and handed me to the warden and gone back to his fire and his solitude and his one clean job. He thought about it. I know he thought about it because he told me later, when I was grown and we could speak as 2 adults about the terrible arithmetic of that down. He told me he sat by the fire hearth the second night and worked it out like a sum. The shelter had more people and more warmth and more of my own kind. The shelter also, by everything the child had told him, was exactly where the thing came. The thing came to shelters. The thing took the sleeping young from the middle of the warmth, from among their own kind, and everyone let it. So I did the sum, he told me, years on, and the sum came out that the safest place for you was the one place in the world with a man in it who wasn't going to let it. And that man was me. Wasn't anywhere else to send you that wasn't just handing you over polite. He kept me. He did not make a grand thing of it. He rigged a second cot. He recounted the rations and cut his own portion so the count would stretch. He fitted a smaller heat blanket to my size out of a company spare. And he changed one thing about the way he kept the lamp, one thing that seemed small and was not small at all. He stopped sleeping in the deep of the night. I told you the fire had a keeper because a fire that size will kill you if it is minded wrong. But the truth is the lamp mostly minded itself. The fire heart was built by clever hands and it ran clean for long stretches, and the old keepers had slept most of the down away, waking to feed it and check the gauges and going back down. Cade had slept that way too before me. After me, he did not. because he had understood faster than my whole people had understood in 10,000 years the one thing that mattered. The sallow took the sleeping, all of them, child and keeper both, if the keeper slept. And an evil child in the down could not choose to stay awake. The torpor took me whether I willed it or not, dropped me into that death-deep sleep where nothing could rouse me. So there was only one watcher possible in that house, him, and so he watched. I did not know, most of that down, how little he slept. I was a child and I slept the way our young sleep, long and heavy and often, and each time I surfaced from it he was there by the fire, awake, and I thought nothing of it, because a child thinks the adult is always there the way the fire is always there. It was only near the end that I understood he was killing himself by inches to keep his eyes open, snatching a broken hour here and there in the shallow part of the day that was not a day, the brief gray slack when even the sallow seemed to rest, and standing the rest of it awake by will alone. Let me tell you how the days went in the middle of it before it got bad, because it was not all terror. That is another thing the soft tellings get wrong. Most of it was small and warm, and I would give a great deal to have any of it back. He taught me to read his gauges. He did not have to. He did it because a child with a job is a child who is not afraid, and he knew that some way in his bones. He would set me on a stool by the pressure glass and give me the job of watching the little needle, and if it climbed past a red mark I was to call him, and I took this work with the whole ferocity of a small creature who has been given something to guard. I called out that needle 100 times when it did not need calling. He never once told me I was wrong to. He taught me his letters and I taught him mine, and we made a game of it, scratching the two alphabets side by side in the soot on the iron with a cold nail, and he was clumsy at ours, and I was clumsy at his, and we laughed at each other. And the laughing in that iron room under the roaring fire is one of the sounds I have kept. And every single time before I went down into the sleep, every time without fail for the whole of that down, he said the same 4 words to me. He would tuck the heat blanket around me and he would nod at the little blue pilot flame in the base of the fire heart, and he would say, "Eyes on the light." And I would look at the little blue flame until the torpor took me and my eyes closed on their own. And the last thing I saw, every time, was that small steady light, and the big shape of him sitting awake between me and the door. I did not know it was a promise. I thought it was just a thing he said. The sallow came for the first time in the 4th month, and I slept through it. And that is the only reason I am alive to tell you, because if I had woken I would have died of fear, and Cade knew that too, which is why he never woke me for any of it. He told me about that first time when I was grown, and only that once, and he did not embroider it because he was not a man who embroidered. He said he was awake, as he always was by then, sitting by the fire with the gauges glowing and me a small warm lump in the deep sleep across the room, and the fire was roaring its steady roar, and then he could not say how he knew the room went wrong. That is the word he used, wrong. He said the fire did not dim and the cold did not deepen and no door opened and no sound came, but the room went wrong, the way a room goes wrong when someone is standing behind you who should not be there. He said the little hairs came up on his arms. He said he had been a soldier before Downmark on worlds he would not name. And he had felt a lot of rooms go wrong in his life, and he knew the feeling, and he had learned to trust it before he understood it. He said he stood up. He put himself between me and the dark part of the room by the door, the far side, away from the fire, where the light did not reach so well, and he made the fire bigger. That was all he did that first time. He opened the feed and he made the great fire roar up hotter and higher, and threw the hard white light all the way into the corners of the room, every corner, so there was no dark part left, and he stood in the middle of all that light between the sleeping child and the place the wrongness was, and he waited. And I asked him when he told me. I was grown and my hands were shaking anyway. What did it do? Nothing, he said. That's the thing about it. It never does anything, Esh. It doesn't fight you. It's not a beast. It's more like, and he stopped and looked for the word because he was careful with words. It's more like a tide. It comes in where there's nothing to stop it, and where there's something to stop it, it just doesn't come in. It went. I don't know where. The room stopped being wrong. And I sat back down and I put more fuel by the door so I wouldn't have to reach far next time. And I didn't sleep for 2 days after, and I never told you, because you had enough to carry. That was the shape of it. It did not roar or strike. It felt for the unwatched place, the sleeping and the unlit and the unguarded, and where it found a man on his feet with a fire at his back and his eyes open. It did not find what it was looking for, and it withdrew, patient as winter, to look somewhere else. And somewhere else that down it found. I learned later, everyone learned, the way you learn these things in low voices, that a child had gone from the south shelter that month. From the middle of the warmth. From among her own. A small one named Vesk, whom I had known a little, gone in the night with no track and no blood, and the shelter grieved her the way we grieved, quietly, and folded her memory away, and called it the tithe. She had been sleeping. Of course she had been sleeping. They were all sleeping. That was the whole horror of us, a people who could not stay awake to guard their own children in a dark that lasted months, who had decided the only thing to do was sleep close together, and hope the tide came in on someone else's shelter. And 3 leagues north, one offworlder who did not know any better sat awake in a burning room with his eyes open, and the tide did not take the child in his keeping, because he would not let it. The warden came to us in the 5th month, and that is when I first understood that Cade was not only fighting the dark, he was fighting us. Her name was Sethri, and she was the keeping elder of the south shelter, an old gray eagle with a flat dead crest, and the tired eyes of someone who had buried a great many small ones and called each burial the tithe. She came north across the pan with 2 others in the brief gray slack of the day, muffled to the eyes, and she came because word had reached the shelter. The haulers carried word, when they braved the down for the oil, that the offworlder at the beacon was keeping an orphaned eagle child through the whole dark, alone, by his lit lamp, against every custom we had. I remember her in our doorway. I remember being afraid of her in a way I was never afraid of Cade, because Cade's hardness was turned outward at the dark, and hers was turned inward at us, at me. She was not cruel. I want to be fair to her too, because I have had a long life to think about her, and I no longer think she was a villain, only a broken thing that had learned the wrong lesson too well. She spoke gently. She told Cade he had done a kind thing, taking the child in from the cold, and that it was time now to do the wise thing and bring the child south to her own people. She told him the child belonged in the shelter, among the eagle, in the shared warmth. She used the word shared, and I did not understand yet what she was truly saying. Cade understood. He said, in the shelters where they get taken. And Sethri's tired eyes flickered, and she said the true thing under all the gentle words, and I have never forgotten it. She said, Keeper, you do not understand our world. When it comes, it comes. If it comes to the shelter, it takes one, and it is done, and the rest are spared. That is the mercy of it. One, and it is over. But you, and she looked at the great burning lamp above us, the hard white light pouring out over the pan. You sit here with a fire the size of a house and a child in your keeping, and you make yourself the loudest thing in the whole dark. You do not turn it away, offworlder. You call it. And when it comes to you and you turn it back because you are stubborn, because you do not sleep, because you are not made the way we are made, where do you think it goes then? The room was very quiet under the roar of the fire. It goes south, said Sethri. It goes to the shelter, to the sleeping ones who cannot turn it back, and it takes a child that would not have been taken because you would not simply let it have the one it came for. You are not saving that child. You are trading her for one of ours. I was small and I did not understand all of it, but I understood enough to feel the floor drop out of the world. I thought, it is my fault. I thought, children are dying in the South because Cade keeps me. I thought, I should go. I should go into the dark and let it take me, and then it will leave the others alone. I know now that was a child's arithmetic, and a poisoned one, and that Sethri had done a wicked thing by speaking it in front of me, even if she did not mean to be wicked. But it lodged in me like a splinter, and it might have festered there my whole life, except for what Cade did next. He did not argue with her about whether it was true. That is the thing. He did not say, "No, it does not go south, you are wrong." He was too honest a man for that, and the truth was he did not know, and neither did she, not really. It was all the guesswork of frightened people about a thing none of them understood. What he did instead was refuse the whole shape of the question. He got down on one knee the way he had the first night, so his face was level with mine, and he did not speak to Sethri at all. He spoke to me. He said, "Esh, look at me. None of this is yours to carry. You hear me? You didn't call anything. You're a child. A child isn't a price. Whatever that thing is and wherever it goes, it doesn't get to make you into a coin that other people spend. That's not how it works. Not in my house." And then he stood up and he faced the old warden and he said, in a voice with no heat in it at all, which was somehow worse than shouting, "You want to know what I think, elder? I think you've been burying your children for 10,000 years and telling yourself it's mercy so you don't have to feel it. And maybe you're right that it'll go south if I hold the line here. I don't know. Nobody knows. But I know this. I'm not handing this child to the dark to buy quiet, and neither are you, not from my house. And if the thing has a problem with that, it can come here and take it up with me, and I'll be awake." Sethri looked at him for a long moment, and I saw something move in her old, tired face, something she covered fast, and I did not know what it was then. I know now. It was grief. It was the grief of a woman who had buried 100 children under the name of mercy, standing in front of a man who was telling her, without meaning to, that it had never been mercy at all, that there had always been another thing to do, and they had simply never done it because it was hard, and because no one among them was built to stay awake. She did not answer him. She gathered her 2 silent companions, and she went back out into the gray and south across the pan to her shelter, and her sleeping children, and her long custom of surrender. And Cade barred the door and put more fuel by it and did not sleep, and the down ground on toward its worst. I need to slow down now, because we are coming to the night it all turned, and I have never told it whole to anyone, and I do not know if I will get the chance again. The down does not end all at once. It ends the way it comes, slow, the world's old wheel grinding around, and there is a stretch near the very end that is the worst of the whole season, the deep, they call it, the bottom of the dark, when the cold is at its killing hardest and the fuel everywhere is at its lowest, and the sun is still a long way from coming back. It is in the deep that the shelters lose the most, and it is in the deep that a body has the least left to fight with, and it was in the deep, in the 7th month of that down, that everything I have been telling you came due at once. 3 things went wrong together, and it was the 3 together that nearly killed us. The first was the fuel. The company haulers had stopped coming. The deep was too hard even for them, and the beacon's own store of slow oil was running down, and Cade had been feeding the great fire lower and lower to make it last, and the room was colder than it had ever been, and the hard white light that had thrown for leagues was a dimmer, redder thing now, drawn in close. The second was Cade himself. 7 months. 7 months of a man not sleeping in the cold on cut rations, standing a watch that had no relief and no end. I was a child and I had not seen how much it had cost him because a child does not see those things, but I see it now, looking back, the way his big frame had gone gaunt, the tremor that had come into his hands, the long gray stretches where he sat by the fire with his eyes open and fixed and saw nothing, running on nothing but will. He was at the end of himself. He had spent everything he had, and there was a little left, and he was spending that too. And the third thing was that the sallow and the deep came in earnest. It had felt for us before, that down the first time in the 4th month, and twice more that I slept through and did not learn of until later, and each time Cade had made the fire big and stood between and it had withdrawn. But those had been the light feints of a tide only testing the shore. In the deep, with the fire low and the man spent, it came the way the tide comes when the storm is behind it. I was awake for that one. I have wished 1,000 times that I had not been, and I have understood 1,000 times that it was necessary that I was, because it is the reason I could carry the watch forward, because you cannot keep a thing you have never seen. Cade would never have woken me. The torpor woke me itself, some animal part of me clawing up out of the death sleep, because the room had gone so wrong that even a sleeping child could feel it. I will tell it as plainly as he would have wanted. I came up out of the sleep, and the first thing I knew was that the fire was small. Not out, Cade would never let it go out, but small, a low red guttering thing, and the room was dim and cold in a way it had never been, and the corners were full of dark. And the room was wrong. I understood in that instant what Cade had meant by the word. The whole room was wrong. Wrong the way a held breath is wrong. Wrong the way the moment before a fall is wrong. And I could not have told you where the wrongness was, because it was everywhere and nowhere. It was in the dark by the door, and the dark in the corners, and the dark that had come, somehow, into the middle of that iron room where dark had never been. And Cade was on his feet between me and all of it. He was swaying, I remember that. 7 months, and he was swaying on his feet like a man in a high wind, and he had one hand braced on the fire heart to hold himself up, and he was feeding the fire. His other hand was working, feeding the last of the slow oil into the feed by the fistful. Everything he had, no more careful hoarding, all of it at once, trying to make the fire big enough to fill the room with light. And the fire was fighting him, sputtering on the cold, thick oil, catching and dying and catching again. Because there was so little left, and it was so cold. "Esh," he said. He did not look back at me. He kept his eyes on the dark. "Esh, if you can hear me, eyes on the light. You keep your eyes on the light, and you do not look anywhere else." I looked at the little blue pilot flame in the base of the fire heart, the small steady one that never went out, the same small flame he had shown me the first night, and I fixed my eyes on it the way he had taught me every single night of that whole dark season, and I did not look at the wrongness. And I have thought since that the reason I did not go mad with fear in that moment is only that he had drilled that one small act into me so many times that my terrified child's body did it without asking my mind. And the fire would not catch. The oil was gone, the last of it. He had fed everything into the feed, and the great fire had flared once, high and hard and white, filling the room, driving the wrongness back to the very edges. I felt it recoil. I felt the room ease for one breath. And then the oil was spent, and the great fire fell, guttered, sank down toward that small blue pilot, and the dark came flooding back in from the corners like water into a whole boat. And I heard Cade make a sound I had never heard him make. It was not a word. It was the sound of a man who has spent everything and is reaching for more and finding the drawer empty. And in the low red dying light I saw him look fast around that iron room for anything at all that would burn. And I watched Elias Cade begin to feed the fire his life. I mean it plainly. There was nothing left to burn but the room itself and the man in it. He tore the cot, his cot, the one he'd slept his broken hours in, and fed the frame into the feed, and it caught, and the fire came up a little, and the dark drew back a little. He fed it the table. He fed it the stool I had watched the gauges from, and I remember a small mad grief at that, at the stool, as if the stool were a friend. He fed it his own heat blanket, and then, when there was nothing else in reach, he did the thing I have never been able to speak of without stopping. He took off his coat. His heavy off-worlder coat, the one thing between his gaunt, spent body and the killing cold of the deep, and he fed it into the fire, and it caught, and it burned, and the light came up, and he stood there in his thin shirt in the cold that kills, swaying, one hand on the iron, and he put his body between me and the dark, and he said, through his teeth, not to me and not to the dark, but to the whole of that ancient patient tide, he said, "You don't get her, do you understand me? You've had 10,000 years of them. You've had every child these people ever loved, and they let you, and they called it mercy. Not this one. Not from me. You want her, you go through me, and I am not going to sleep, and I am not going to sit down, and I am not going to move, so you had best get comfortable, because I have got all night. I have got all night." He said that in the deep of a dark that had months left to run, with no fuel and no coat and nothing left in his body, to a thing that had been taking children since before his people learned to make a fire. He had nothing, and he would not yield. That is the whole of it. That is the thing my people, in all their long wisdom, had never once tried because it made no sense, because it could not work, because a man cannot outlast the dark by will alone. Except the world was still turning. That old heavy wheel, sand in the axle, grinding around the way it always had. And what none of us knew, what Cade did not know, what even the tide did not seem to reckon on, was that the deep was not the bottom after all. The bottom had passed, some hours before, unnoticed, and the wheel had come around by the smallest fraction, and far off past the edge of the pan, past the black rim of the world, the sun was coming. Not risen, not for a long time yet, but coming, its first gray rumor bleeding up over the eastern rim, the barest thinning of the black, the kind of gray you would not even notice if you had not spent 7 months in a dark with no gray in it at all. And the tide felt it before we did. I was watching the little blue flame as I had been told, so I did not see the dark ease. I felt it. I felt the room stop being wrong. It did not happen fast. It happened the way a fever breaks, the wrongness draining out of the corners slow and grudging, the held breath letting go, the fall not falling after all. And I heard Cade above me make a different sound, a long shaking breath, the breath of a man who has been holding the whole weight of the sky and feels it at last begin to lift. "There," he said, very quiet, almost gentle. "There it goes, told you all night." The tide withdrew. It went wherever it goes, patient, unbeaten really, only turned back for this one dark from this one house, off to wait out the long bright season and come again when the sun went down once more. But it went, and it left the child in that house behind it, because between the child and the dark there had been a man who would not sleep and would not sit down and would not move, and it had, in the end, run out of night before he ran out of will. And the gray came up over the rim of the world, thin and cold and impossibly beautiful, the first light of a sun that had been gone for 7 months, and it came in through the high slit windows of the beacon house and fell across the iron floor, and Elias Cade sat down. He did not fall, I want that remembered. He sat slowly with control, his back against the warm iron of the fire heart in his thin shirt, spent past anything I have words for, and he looked at me across that ruined room full of the ash of everything he owned, and the gray light was on his gaunt gray face, and he smiled at me, a small tired smile, and he said the 4 words one last time, softly, as if it were still night, as if I still needed telling. "Eyes on the light." And I looked, and the light this time was not the little blue flame, it was the sun. He lived. I should say that plainly and early, because the way I have been telling it you might fear otherwise, and he would be annoyed with me for scaring you. He was a hard man, and the cold nearly had him but did not. And when the day came fully up and the haulers braved out to the beacon and found the 2 of us in that stripped and ash-strewn room, the child asleep at last in the safe gray light, and the keeper wrapped in the child's small heat blanket because I had put it over him while he could not stop me, they got fuel to the fire and food into him and word to the south, and he lived. The South shelter had lost no child that deep. I learned that later, and I have turned it over all my life, and I do not know what it means. Sethri had told Cade the thing would only go south if he turned it from his own house, and it had not gone south, and there is no way to know whether that means she was wrong, or whether the deep was simply so hard that the tide, turned back from the loud lit house on the north edge, had not the strength left to reach the shelters 3 leagues on, or whether it means nothing at all and the dark keeps no accounts we can read. Cade would not let me chew on it. When I raised it grown, he said the only wise thing anyone ever said to me about the whole matter. He said, "Esh, you can't make yourself small enough to be safe from a thing that eats children. You can only put yourself between it and them and stay awake. The math of who it takes instead was never yours to do. It was always the dark's fault. Not yours, not even ours, it's." Sethri came north again when the sun was up. She came alone that time. She did not gather her companions, and she did not muffle her face against a cold that was breaking, and she stood in the doorway of that ash-strewn room in the new gray day, and she looked at the stripped iron and the ruined cot and the gaunt man by the fire and the small living child, and her old dead crest lifted, just slightly, the way it does in the young. She did not apologize. There was no word in our long grammar of surrender for what she would have needed to say. But she looked at Cade for a long time, and then she said, in our own tongue, not the trade speech, our own, which she did not have to do, which meant she was saying it to him as one of the people and not as an off-worlder, she said, "Teach me to stay awake." And he did. That is the part they leave out of the soft tellings, and it is the part that matters most, the part that is the whole reason I am telling you any of this. Because one man keeping one child through one dark is a small thing, a candle against a country of night, and if that were all it had been, it would have been beautiful and it would have changed nothing. But it did not stop there. Cade taught Sethri to stay awake. Not the way he did it, the Ehel cannot simply not sleep the way an off-worlder can, our bodies will not have it, but the thing beneath it, the true thing which was never really about sleep at all. It was about the watch. It was about the idea, so simple and so impossible for us, that the dark could be stood against, that a child was not a coin, that where there was a light and someone to keep it, the tide did not come in. Sethri took that idea back to the south shelter, and she built a watch. They could not all stay awake, but some could, in turns, an hour each. A chain of waking passed hand to hand through the whole long dark, a lit lamp and open eyes at the center of the shelter, where before there had been only banked fire and hope and surrender. And the next down, the south shelter lost no child. And the down after that, 3 shelters kept the watch, because word travels among a people the way fire travels, once it catches, and the down after that a dozen, and the thing that we had called the tithe for 10,000 years, the fate that could not be fought, the fact of the world as hard as the cold began, shelter by shelter, watch by watch, lamp by lamp, to be a thing that happened less. And then rarely. And then in the places that kept the watch well, not at all. We did not defeat it. I want to be honest, because he hated a lie, and to tell you we defeated the dark would be a lie. The sallow still walks the down. It comes still to the shelter that lets its lamp gutter, to the watch that nods off, to the child no one is keeping their eyes on. It is patient and it is old and it is not beaten. But it is no longer owed. That is the whole of the change, and it is everything. It is no longer a tithe we pay. It is a thing we stand against, and mostly now turn back, because one off-worlder who did not know it was impossible simply refused to sleep, and showed a broken people that the refusing was a thing that could be done. He would not take credit for it. When I would try, when I was grown and understood what he had begun, he would wave it off and say he had only kept one child from one dark, and anything after that was our own doing, the Ehel's, not his. And that is true, and it is like him to say it, and I let him say it while he lived. But I will not let it stand now that he is gone. It was his. The whole turning of it was his. He did not save a people. He did a smaller and a greater thing. He saved one child all the way, without doing the terrible sum of whether she was worth the cost. And in the doing of it he showed us that one child could be saved all the way, and once we had seen that, we could not unsee it, and everything else followed. Elias Cade kept the lamp on downmark for 11 more downs, and then he grew old. Off-worlders grow old faster than we do, and one bright season between the darks he told me, he was going home to his warm world with its fast sun to die where he was born, and he did, and I was with him, because by then I was grown and I had the means to go to him, and I would not have him keep that last watch alone. He was not afraid at the end. I asked him. I was a grown Ehel and I had learned not to be soft with him because he despised soft, but I asked him near the last whether he was afraid of the dark that was coming for him now, the last dark, the one no lamp keeps back. And he looked at me with his old spent eyes, and he smiled the small tired smile, and he said, "Esh, I've got you keeping watch. What's to be afraid of?" And then he said the 4 words one final time, and I have kept them, and I keep them still, and I will keep them until my own last dark. He said, "Eyes on the light." And I have kept my eyes on it every down since. I keep a lamp now myself. Not the great beacon that is minded by others, by a whole guild of watchers now, Ehil and Offworlder together, and there is no shame any more in an Ehil who sits alone by a burning light through the dark. It is the most honored work we have. I keep a smaller lamp in a smaller house on the edge of a smaller pan, and I take in the young that the dark has orphaned, the way I was taken in, and I keep them, and I do not do the sum of whether keeping them is wise. And when the down comes and the tide feels for us, I stand between it and them, and I do not sleep, or I keep others waking who can, and I keep the light, and I turn it back. The dark still comes. It has learned on the worlds where we keep the watch that it will find a light and open eyes and someone standing who will not move, and mostly now it does not bother to come at all. But it comes. It is patient. It is waiting out the long, bright season, as it always does, for the sun to go down and the fires to burn low and the watchers to grow tired and forget. So we do not forget. That is the whole of what he left us. We keep the lamp, and we keep our eyes on the light, and we teach the small ones to keep theirs, so that when I am gone and my lamp is cold, there will be another hand to light it, and another after that, a chain of waking passed down through all the darks to come, because one man once refused to hand a child to the night, and in the refusing showed a whole people that the night could be refused. His name was Elias Cade. He kept the lamp, and he would not let the dark take me. Eyes on the light.